Welcome to The Art of Growth, where we use the Enneagram and the best tools we can find to help you transform. I'm Jim Zartman, and today is the Sexual One panel, where Joel and I are interviewing a panel of Type 1s who are dominant in the sexual instinct. It's a fascinating combination that goes against some of the stereotypes and expectations of the one, which is why it's so important to understand this. It's amazing. We've been learning a lot, and we hope you are learning a lot about yourself and the people around you through this process. If you haven't taken our instincts test yet, please do that. www.theartofgrowth.org. It's a free test, and it shows you your instinctual stack. So where your dominant is, which we can tend to overuse, our secondary, which is more functions neutrally or serves our dominant, and then our neglected or repressed or often resisted one that is the last one, which can cause some issues. And we need to move towards integration. And if we integrate these instincts better, it's not about becoming something you're not, but about becoming more of yourself in more of an intentional way. And that's what this integration does as we move toward that. So take that test so you have a better understanding of yourself. And for some people, this is actually a more accessible step into the Enneagram world. We also have a free Enneagram test there, as well as a sign up to get on the waiting list for the next group coaching sessions that come up. Understanding the instincts and how this shows up in your work world is an absolute game changer as well. Certain industries can reflect one of the instincts more than others, and people with differing dominant instincts are in all of those industries. So if this is something you'd be interested in bringing into your workplace, please reach out to us through our website. Follow us on Instagram at Art of Growth, and please leave us a review on iTunes because it really helps people find us, and that is hugely helpful in allowing us to continue to produce this content. All right, let's jump into it with the Sexual One panel.
Well, welcome everybody to the Sexual One podcast. I'm so excited to have all of you here with us. And we are going through all the instincts, through all the types. We've taken on this incredibly crazy endeavor. But the reason for that is because what we're trying to do is allow the different types and their instincts to express themselves. And what we're going to learn throughout this season is how different that can be. And so today we're going to see even more of that, because the sexual one is oftentimes called the counter type of the one. And so if you were to read just a straight up description of the one, you may not be like, just there's a few parts that just don't click for me. And so this is what I'm looking forward to hearing a bit more from you. So let's begin. First of all, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from.
All right. I'm Lauren. I'm from Madison, Wisconsin.
I'm Sam. I'm from San Diego, California.
I'm Sonia. I'm from Southern Finland.
And I am Lori, and I'm from Ohio.
We got you from everywhere. This is fantastic. Different parts of the country and the world. So super excited to have you. Well, let's begin with the first question about the type one. The feature of the one that is the most well-known, the most common one would be sort of the core, which is the need to be good, the need to be right, the need to be perfect, the avoidance of being at fault. All of that sort of plays in together, but feel free to kind of spin off of one of them if one of those descriptors fit you better. But how does that show up for you through the sexual instinct? And so we'll start with risk. How does that show up for you in the area of taking risk?
Well, for me, I feel that there is tension between the sexual instinct and my oneness.
Okay.
So my sexual instinct pushes me to take risks, but the need to be perfect makes it extra risky.
Oh.
So then I land in between. And when I was younger, I often chose not to take the risk, even though I wanted to. And then I dreamt about doing stuff that I didn't dare to do because I didn't feel that I could master it, maybe.
It feels like an extra level of pressure. I think that's what it creates.
And for me, guys, I research everything to death. And as soon as I've got it, I'll jump. But I make sure I have all the pieces in place. It's a calculated risk.
Okay. Do you still feel like the others, the impulse towards wanting to take a risk?
Oh, absolutely. And not failing, right? That's the big thing. You don't want to fail. So you'll do whatever you need to do to make sure that doesn't happen.
I'm less calculated about my risks, actually. I am more impulsive. And I think that's grown with age for me too. I think I was more risk averse when I was younger because I was even more on that need to be good and perfect. But now I think it's partly because I've matured in my value system. So for me, taking risks is seen as such a part of being good. Like what it means to be good is being a risk taker. So even if something ends up imperfectly, I still did the right thing by taking the risk.
Fascinating.
Wow. Yeah. You folks should keep doing such a good job of expressing how all the features of the one can either have the high side or low side to them. It depends on how it's used. And so the reaction formation is what's classically called the defense mechanism of the one, which means there's sort of like I feel this and I shouldn't, so I'm going to do the opposite, or I'm going to justify it, that happening internally. And you've taken that to say, well, let's take this impulse to risk that I might feel, hesitant about. And because it may not be good, or it may lead me to something bad, and actually, reform it to this is the right thing to do, is to take risks and not to be so avoidant. I love that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely a reframing and kind of a reclaiming too. It's easy to feel really high and mighty about it in a way, and like, I am so good at look at me doing this, but also it can easily be a rationalization and an excuse to just want to follow my impulses and I'm doing it because it's great, right? But maybe not.
Yeah. And that's the duality sometimes that's described about the sexual one, where it's both the desire to go after things that you want in sort of that indulgent way, and yet this sort of also restraint that can also play a role. Maybe you can talk about that, all of you. Do you feel that duality within you of like, I want this and I want to go after it, and sometimes giving yourself permission to go after it, and yet still having the core need to be right and good at play in that? Maybe you can talk about is that true for you, and what is that like?
I'm a little bit probably older than the rest of the group, so I'm going to use the word mature. So when I was young, I would just jump. I would jump and then I would try to figure it out. As I've matured, I've kind of put a little bit more behind it, but it's always there. It's like no matter what I'm doing, I'm always looking at that next thing, that next thing I want to do, and not always staying here, but looking there. And that's frustrating at times. But again, justifying that risk that, okay, I really want to do this, so let's go do it, see what happens.
Interesting that I related to Lauren when you said that you were more hesitant to take risks as you were younger. And now Lori say the other way around. This feeling that there is always some next thing to find out about it. I relate to that part also.
I just am listening to the other everybody else on the panel, and I'm thinking of how wow, Lauren sounds like she has a lot of high side of the one, and I just think gosh, I'm in this moment thinking how much maybe I'm just so impulsive currently, but there's a constant ping of back and forth between I really want to do this. Oh wait, but I can't. That's how it feels like a cajoling a little bit for me. With some risk taking, I think it depends on the context too, because I grew up in theater and in a context where it was a little bit maybe okay to be risky and be more silly. It would be easier, but I would still think but I have to do this right. I have to perform this the right way. I have to have the right emotion. I have to do this, and it has to be good for everybody else. And everybody else has to recognize it as good.
Wow.
So there's risk taking in theater, but in acting, but there's also risk taking in classroom setting. I remember taking an ethics class in college, and I just remember really dwelling on this one ethical problem that was being talked about in class. And I think in that moment, I kind of just exploded in the classroom. I just said, well, I don't know if this is this and that, isn't that just the same thing? And everybody kind of like turned to me and looked at me, and it was kind of awkward, but everybody just started clapping. And it was such an awkward moment that it was just like, in that particular context, I felt like I was trying to like make a point and like show people my righteous indignation. And it like led the whole classroom to clapping. But in the end, I kind of just felt awkward because everybody was staring at me. And the teacher ended up just saying like, well, I don't know the answer to that. I was just kind of like, okay, whatever. But there's a lot of like the frustration of like wanting to take a risk in a particular context, but then like also like, wait, backpedaling a little bit. That happens for me as a sexual one.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the next subcategory underneath the sexual instinct, which is broadcasting and attracting. And this has to do with putting yourself out there, finding ways to bring attention to yourself in a way that may feel a little bit uncomfortable, but it's also the desire to make that connection, to be seen in some sense. And I see it as a step towards this idea of connection, but it is its own sort of category, broadcasting and attracting. So talk to me about how that shows up for you as a one, as it relates to being good, perfect, right, not at fault.
I think the stories I just told probably fit this category more.
Like when you spoke up in class or something, is that?
Yeah, because definitely the feeling of like, I know I'm right, and I want you to know that I'm right. I feel like that's like what I was broadcasting in my classroom story that I just shared.
Is there an attraction element to that? Or are you trying to draw others towards yourself in that?
I think it was so impulsive that I didn't realize that I was doing that. I don't think I was conscious that I was doing that. Because I got attention, everybody started clapping in the class, but I'm not sure if it was necessarily a conscious thing for me.
I also really relate to it from a thinking back to the classroom perspective. I was the kid to raise my hand for every single question that the teacher would ask, as long as I knew I had the answer, which I usually did. But I wanted to be seen as the smart girl in class who was engaged and had all the answers, had my stuff together. You can call on me. I got this. And I wanted people to see that. I wanted the other smart kids in the class to like admire me for it. But if I was unsure, if I wasn't quite certain about the answer, no hand. And not as much like questioning of a teacher if I had something that was unclear to me, because I didn't want to be seen as not having the answers, not being perfect. And then the other main way that it shows up for me nowadays in my life is in karaoke. So like that's a big passion of me. I am very into it, and I love getting the attention on stage. And I want everyone to see me as like amazing performer and someone who's having a great time and someone they want to, you know, hang out with and be attracted to. But I also really want to nail the song. So I'm really hesitant to do something that I haven't practiced ahead of time, or that I'm not sure that I can nail it. But again, part of the going back to risk taking, sometimes I let myself go through and, okay, I might not hit this song perfectly, but it's still going to get a good reaction from the crowd. So it'll be worth it.
Nice.
So interesting. Wow.
For me, I have always been like a bit hesitant to take space. So I sort of have been waiting for someone to notice that, to give me that space, because I'm uncertain that I'm enough. If somebody else recognizes that I'm enough, then I get more confident. But as I get older, I start to take that place more and more. And another situation where this is playing out is often I find a new hobby. And when I find a new hobby, I get very excited about it and I learn a lot about it and I cannot contain it. I just have to tell to everybody out about this great thing that I have found out, and everybody should see how great it is, and everybody should be as excited as I am. Then I'm just pouring it out on everybody.
Yeah.
And that looks very much like a 7. And this is where it's so interesting how that fusion that and we'll talk about that next, even happens with an idea, with something new, where it's like the risk compels you to try something, you go into it, you fuse with that idea, that new thing, it's all consuming. And then you broadcast it, you want it out there for the sake of it coming back in some attractional way, like, wow, I've made this connection. That also plays a role in that. But it sounds like to me, Sonia, if I'm understanding you, even though there's a hesitation in the area of putting yourself out there, the broadcasting, you'll sometimes dip your toe in that to see if there's a response, a positive response. Is that true? Is that how it works for you?
Yeah. My father was probably a social one. And I got so much from home to do the right thing in the right way. And he steered me a lot into doing things in the conventional way. But my own impulse is to do things in a new way. So I have sort of tried to break those limits that my father built for me in a way.
That is so good. Such a good illustration of like what happens with the sexual instinct kind of going, well, I want to push the boundaries here, even the rules sometimes. Yeah.
This brought up something interesting is, I was hearing about the classroom and the karaoke. Like these are what you would think of as more public settings. And so often we think of the sexual or the one-to-one as being using this broadcasting attraction to draw in, the sizzle of the interaction with another person. And yet it was put more in a public kind of a context. And so I was just curious about that because I'm not exactly sure of the question, but it made me curious because I was like, I would have expected that to be a little bit more in the personal one-to-one connection realm. And a few of these examples have been more in the public sphere.
Well, for me, mine, I'm going to say is more on the one-to-one. I've been in sales my whole life. So for me, the active listening piece, I use this instinct to figure out where that person's emotion is in that buying scenario. So I really take that time to listen and then build my story, right? Because sales is an emotional buy. And that's where I use mine the most to build that. I don't even exactly know how to say it, but for me, it's just to build a story so that it helps them to understand why they're buying it. And in the end, what the emotional piece is of it.
That's so interesting that Lori is sharing that. I'm not in sales, but I used to work as a telephone fundraiser for my college. For me, in that context, talking to someone one-on-one, I would feel like I would usually go over like the time that was allotted to me. Sure. There's like a limited time that I'm supposed to get the call done within like 7 minutes and get someone to donate. I had a tendency of going over where the one-to-one shows up, even though the public things are something that you notice, Jim. I think for me, when I think about those things, I'm thinking about more of like the reaction I'm having with one person in a one-to-one setting with another person after I did that public thing. That's the motivating thing for me, at least.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah. For me, it's what happens after class when someone comes up to you in the hallway and says that was a really insightful comment, or it's what happens when you come down off of stage from karaoke and you got all the attention of the whole group, but then you can go sit down with somebody and have that personal of like really affirming what you just did and building a deeper connection.
All right.
So it's using the public broadcasting to garner these individual one-to-one strong connections.
Yes.
Exactly.
I'm about to dance myself and I'm out of one. This is so true of the sexual energy. You are so right on about that. That's how it happens.
Also, if I'm telling everybody about my newest infatuation, it's to scan the crowd to find the persons that I can talk about this certain thing.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like when you connected, you can see it in them. You're on the right plane, and that's where I get excited. I'm like, yes, we've hit that sweet spot.
Which makes sense of you being in sales. Like it makes complete sense as a one, but as a sexual one, because you are awakening. We've said this before, the sexual instinct helps to awaken the heart center. So we're talking about 3 centers, head, heart, and body. three instincts. The sexual instinct really does that. And so when you're having that moment of connection with somebody, there is an awakening of the heart. And in some sense, it sounded like, someone might hear that and go, are you manipulating? Is this like a manipulative tactic in sales? But I see you shaking your head no. And I'm with you that it's not really that. There is something just in the exchange itself that's rewarding. The setting and the context is just there for the purpose of getting that sexual energy going.
Well, and two, with sales, to me, your whole need is to meet their need, right? If you've met their need, then you've done what you need to do, and they walk away happy. And in the end, we're there to serve people. That's all we're there to do. But that meeting point, that sweet spot is where you both win, right?
Yeah.
You both win.
So good. Well, let's move this since we're already heading right to this. And I'm glad that you've picked up and intuited how the three subcategories under the sexual instinct all kind of work together. And you're seeing that already and you're communicating it that way. So let's talk about the third one, which is fusion. That is that energetic. We're just talking about that energetic exchange with somebody else. Some people call it a sizzle. Some people call it vibrancy, something happening in the exchange. So talk to me about that part and see if you can also maybe tie it into the features of the one as well.
So last night I was talking with one of my friends about privacy and secrecy and how people differ in how they value being private or being more open. And I am extremely on the open side. I don't understand the value of privacy at all. And I am kind of in conflict with someone in my life right now over something we share that they want to keep more private and I want to be more open about. And I was talking about it with a third party last night and I said, I don't get it. I want to tell everybody everything all the time because to me that kind of openness and vulnerability brings such a sizzle and that connection is everything to me. When I can share something important, some people might consider private or secret because it might be important and protected in some way in their heart. But for me, it's the sharing that's the good part. It shows up in oneness in my way is right. My way of being, my preferences, being open is a, capital good thing. And someone who values privacy, that's just wrong. That's not like a difference that's allowed. I need to convert her. I need to reform her so that she becomes more like me and does it the right way and is open. Yeah.
That's also the part of the goodness because I believe that being open and authentic will give you back so much. So actually I'm trying to help the other person by making him or her be more open. Mm-hmm. I relate very much to what Lauren said. It's very much the same thing. But then the sensitivity to criticism, the vulnerability comes in. Like if somebody doubts my intentions, that can be very hurtful because I'm really authentically showing who I am and really investing in the relationship or in the interaction. So one example is when my mom once told me anger was present in me as a child very clearly. And my mom got annoyed with me and she said, I don't understand how you can ever have any friends when you behave like that. And it hurt me so much that I still remember it because she put to question my ability to make this deep contact with other people.
Ouch. Yeah. Yeah, that's a place of great sensitivity. I appreciate you talking about the criticism and how that plays a role in the type 1 as one of the features. The criticism really hurts deeply. There's already enough internal criticism going on that to have that additional one can really be heavy, and how that plays itself out in the desire to connect and to have connection with people. And if someone distrusts that as not authentic or real, boy, that'll shut you down like fast.
Well, along with the topics that were brought up by Lauren and Sonia, this idea of like a vulnerability, I'm working on trying to be more private because I can see how my my tendency for vulnerability and like complete openness and rawness that people don't know actually what to do with sometimes. How I need to actually reel that back. I actually criticize other people talking about like what is real, what is authentic. I don't know, like I'm trying to be authentic, but y'all aren't trying to be authentic in my mind. I don't know. This is an idea within itself that I feel like culturally speaking, I want to criticize because I feel like just the demand for authenticity is like, at least within like larger media and social media. I don't know. For me, I guess I'm trying to like pull back a little bit, and that's something that I'm trying to figure out right now. I don't know.
So if I'm tracking with you, are you talking about there's a vulnerability that's sort of like a cultural thing that people are saying, we need to be real, but what you're finding is that in relationship, that's not really being reciprocated. When you're being authentic or real, you're not feeling it coming back to you. Is that what you're describing?
Yeah, because people don't know what to do with it a lot of the time. And I think, well, part of it is like depending on the nature of what is shared, some heavier things people don't know what to do with. And as somebody who is trying to break into the entertainment industry, another context in which that's also like quite a demand, I think people actually don't know what that means, like what authenticity is, like, or at least maybe I don't know what it means. Like I'm trying to figure out what other people mean by it, because I feel like I'm being like raw and authentic and honest and truthful, but it's usually not received. It's sometimes not received well because I'm judging myself. Like maybe it does come out as judgment towards other people. Like something I've been trying to figure out lately.
I think there can be a performative aspect to authenticity, ironically, for people who claim it as a value, but it can turn into a showy, like, look at me, I'm so authentic. But that's just another screen in and of itself.
Yeah.
Feeling validated by that, huh?
I feel validated by Lauren.
Yeah.
So Steve.
Laura, you talked about it being in the sales context, and we had talked a little bit about that, gotten into a bit of that fusion. Say a little bit more about that. How does it show up for you?
For me, I'm going to take this to a personal side now, because I kind of understand where everybody else is coming from. I kind of live by the adage of when people show you who they are, believe it the first time. So while I have a very small group of core friends that I call ride or die. I mean, they would be there for me 100%. So it's easy to be all in with that, the passion, the fun, the things. We share a lot of the same things, but I'm always authentic. And I think sometimes I rub people the wrong way. That's one of the things that I try to work on my personal life. Now, again, whatever we all do for a living, that's a different world too. You live in kind of two separate worlds, I think. And and I'm totally authentic, whether I'm in my personal or my business life, but I approach it a little different. Like I love the idea of karaoke, but I would never get up there on that stage and do that, But one-on-one with somebody when we're on a sales call or whatever, yeah. So maybe that's kind of like that, but in a whole different sense. But it's still only one-on-one. I can't do that whole group thing like that. That's not who I am.
Yeah.
So.
And this is why the difference is important. I'm glad you're saying what you're saying, Lori. There's no universal description of what a sexual one is. There are certain aspects that are fairly consistent. For example, that sort of energetic exchange that happens between you and another person. That's fairly consistent. But how that gets expressed, absolutely, it'll be different, particularly if you're more introverted. And also it'll help when we get to the other instincts, which I'd like to do so, at this point, is to talk about which one for you comes up as your second or the neutral instinct. Right? We've talked about the neutral instinct being, you've got this sort of sequencing. You've got your dominant instinct. For you, it's the sexual. Then you've got this one that's sort of second. It's neutral. You use it, but it's not something you pay a whole lot of attention to. And then there's a sort of third that ends up more of the neglected, repressed. It creates more of a reaction in you. So talk to me about the second one for you, your neutral one, and how do you use it?
For me, it's definitely self-pres. And the reason it is because I am really good at being highly organized, and I make sure I do schedule everything and I work through everything. And sometimes that gives me the ability not to jump into something I shouldn't, because I'm sitting there putting an order to things and thinking through before I just jump. So I think that would be probably, even though I use it, it's more neutral, but it's behind the scenes and it's just, it's there. That's all. It's just there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
For me, the neutral is social. I've come to realize I use social for the purposes of getting to one-on-one or one-to-one. So I love social situations. As opposed to Lori being an introvert, I'm an extreme extrovert. I really love crowds and groups and people and having social time, but thinking more about like the social instinct rather than just being a social person, in a more generalized sense of the term. Thinking about like group dynamics and how are we doing as a collective. That's not really on my radar of like why I'm social, but I will check in on group dynamics and that kind of thing because I want the group to be good so I can have the one-to-one connections with everybody in it. It's instrumental for me.
Hence the karaoke.
Exactly.
Hence karaoke. Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And I love the comparison. So Lori, for you, the self-pres is your second. That creates a context for you. It gives you those sort of container, the boundaries, the protection of the self and the energy. And for you, Lauren, the second is your social. So that creates the context again for the sexual instinct. Different, but it's making sense of how that second one works. Yeah. How about you, Sonia or Sam?
I'm also social second, and I'm a teacher. So of course I use my social instinct all the time to manage the classroom, and I love my work very much. But it was difficult for me to find the answer to this question, how I use my neutral instinct. It's instinctive. So I had to do a lot of work to find it. And then I realized I'm using it all the time. But also in the classroom, like Lauren said, the best times are when I get a good connection with a certain pupil and we can work together on some problem or something.
Yeah.
But managing the class is very natural. So it's not difficult. It just is.
It just is. It's a skill that you've developed over time. And it, like you said, it is instinctual. So it's not something that you're going to spend a whole lot of time thinking about, but it serves again as a context for the sexual energy.
I think it's social. I think it was hard for me to identify that I was a sexual one to begin with. I read the description of the sexual one and I was like, I'm not this person. This person's a hypocrite. And I had a hard time recognizing that for myself. And I actually defaulted to the social. Like, I think I'm a social person. I think social is the one that I'm willing to do. It's the one I'm willing to do because somebody needs to feel welcomed into the group.
So the third one is that one that's neglected or repressed, the one that creates problems for us. So talk to me about the problem that the third or the neglected one has created for you at times, and then talk about how you're growing through it.
So for me, this one was really easy to answer because the problems that I create for myself, they are everywhere. But it's better with age. Like the everyday awareness of where my stuff is, I lose everything. And then I take other people's stuff by mistake. I misplace my keys. I forget my wallet when there were phone booths in the phone booth, but I forget my wallet in some public place. I don't remember to bring my calendar to work. I forget where I parked my car. I leave the stove on. I forget to pay my bills. It's like I don't have the contact to the physical world somehow with the things that are important to keep to protect myself in a way. And I'm not really aware of my body. So I sit in a weird ways. And then afterwards, I am like, ouch, I feel tension in my body because I'm not really present in my body. So
just same. I also lose things frequently. I feel like I'm trying to be more, I'm working on it. I'm working on being more secure. I don't know. be more organized like Lori.
So my neglected is also self-pres, but it shows up differently for me. So I'm very organized and responsible about finances. I like to keep a clean home. So those categories are closer for me. I think I'm not as distant between my second and third in the stacking, but the category that really falls off for me is in like personal caretaking of the body and health. I neglected that completely for years, like most of my life, until I decided that I had to change. I had to get healthier, really had to adopt it into my value system and make it part of doing the right thing for me. Mm-hmm. And then putting it in the sexual instinct context, I have to be very intense about everything. I can't kind of get a little healthier. If I'm doing this project, I am doing this and I am all the way in. It has to be the intensity of it. So like I do weight training at the gym and I literally do a protocol called high intensity training. And that's the only thing I enjoy. Like that was the first exercise where I was like, this is it, because I get the extremity of it. And that's what feels good to me. And that's how I can be in my body. And now I have other practices for health too. Like I follow certain ways of eating that are very rigid and have clear boundaries of what is in, what is out, what is perfection, what is doing the right thing. But yeah, I really have to put things in a one context of adapting it to my values and put things in the sexual context of going all the way, being intense about it. Yeah. And that's the only way I can improve my self-pres. Yeah.
That's really great. Well done in terms of describing that, how that works for you. Sonia, yeah.
Yeah. I recognize this way of working. Like I have also problems with taking care of my health, but my development has gone in exact opposite way to Lauren's, because I also took on this I made myself a project and started on very strict eating regimes or on a very ambitious training protocol or something like that. And then I did it for a while, was very excited. And then I burnt myself out. And then I stopped doing it totally. So now I have learned that I have to get a different attitude. And the right way for me is I can do anything that I feel like doing right now, as long as I do something. So I had to take the opposite strategy, Lauren.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm thinking of this as people are saying things. So with regards to self-preservation, it's not that I'm not organized. Like I do like organizing things, but I think keeping track of things, like I'll organize something and then I'll forget about it. And so when I think about like my finances, for me personally, I was, when I was living in LA pre-pandemic, I was sleeping on a couch with a friend. I feel like I didn't realize how much I actually just need to sleep in a bed. Like in terms of self-preservation, like I actually do need some things more than just like skimming it and getting by.
Yeah, no, you're right on. There's an awakening that happens in the self-pres area when you've neglected it. And it starts to tell you like you've overplayed your sexual and social, and now you're tired and there are needs. You do have needs, and the self-pres is there to serve the other two. So I'm curious to hear from you, Lori, because for you,
I know I'm the odd man out.
No, this is fantastic. This is what I appreciate so much. How does that play out for you in the social arena then?
Okay, so again, I took the coaching class with Jim, which helped immensely. And I've probably, if you looked at my library right now, I have more self-help books than probably the Library of Congress. But my biggest thing, and I put this last because every boss I've ever worked with, they'll tell me, boy, you're blatant and honest. Boy, you're blatant. Boy, you're right out there. So for me, I finally learned to put a filter on it a little bit and stop and think before I speak, because I'll just regurgitate it all right out there. And that's why I really struggled with this one because for me, social, we talk about being authentic and honest. And sometimes I think I can be a little too much. So that's why I put that as my last one. And I'm a work in progress. And I mean, I'll tell you, the coaching class, there was a couple aha moments that really made me think back to some of these situations and how I could have handled them better. So that's why I put that one as last.
No, thank you. That's wonderful. And we're all work in progress. There's none of us that are in any way completely integrated in all three centers or all three instincts. We're learning to integrate them, and we're having experiments. And in the case of what you mentioned, Sonia, which was, I did go all in, and then I realized that zeal and that energy of the sexual one to kind of go at things, and it tends to be a sexual energy thing anyways. It's sort of like, don't dabble at something, go all in, because there's a fusion and an immersion with that thing that, whatever we're interested in, that's very rewarding. But then you can also harm your body in doing that. You can burn yourself out. And so the intelligence of the self-preservation energy, or instinct rather, is one that says moderate, controlled movement that's deliberate, but not, herky-jerky, or, so it has this sort of intelligence to it that knows this is the best thing for the body. And so it takes some time. Or the social intelligence, which is like, can you read and interpret how your own energy, what impact it's having on the world around you? That's a difficult thing for those of us who don't possess social as our dominant, or it's the neglected one. So that makes a lot of sense for you, Sonia, that being one that can sometimes cause trouble, but to learn how to grow through it. So, yeah, I just really appreciate each of you so much. Like, thank you for being so honest, open, for being authentic with us and sharing your, what you're learning, how you're growing through this, what areas you're still kind of in development. And this is also very good and very helpful. So a huge thanks for having been on this podcast with us.
Absolutely. I agree with Joel. What you've given is a gift, the gift of yourselves. And it does help people understand themselves better and those around them. We don't need perfect examples. We need living examples. And I think y'all have been a great example of that today. So thank you so much for joining us, and we will talk to you again soon.
Bye. Thank you.
So thank you so much for joining us. Join us for the next episode, which is the Social One panel. Again, these distinctions have been incredible to learn about and amazing to reflect on. So thank you for being on this journey with us. Find out about more of our work at www.theartofgrowth.org. We love that so many of you are out there listening, and we are thrilled when people take a step closer and join a newsletter or group coaching program, or do a discovery session with Joel or I to have a better understanding about you and your next step. So you can find out about all of that at theartofgrowth.org. But for now, may you be haunted in the best way possible by the question, where do I need to take a risk? Where do I need to lean in? It can be risky to reach out for love and fear of rejection. But where do you need to reach out to someone in order to strengthen a connection, to make a connection? Where do you need to immerse yourself more deeply into your relationships, your work, something you care about deeply? Where do you need to put yourself out there where you have restrained yourself from taking up too much space? May you be haunted by the best of questions, and may you enjoy and show gratitude for the connections you have and where you have been drawn deeply into your story. Grace and growth, my friends.